I now give the floor to Mariam Jalabi.
السيد الرئيس أصحاب السعادة.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, thank you for the opportunity to deliver this statement. Allow me at the outset to begin with a brief message in Arabic. I address my words to Syrian women and men everywhere, inside the country and across the diaspora, to those who have returned to confront their losses and their wounds, to the martyrs of the Syrian revolution, to those who said no in the face of injustice and paid a heavy price and did not live to witness the great day of joy with the fall of Assad, to those who remain in the camps, and to those who still hold on to hope that justice will be delivered. Let us celebrate the anniversary of our liberation. Let us continue this path together with awareness and responsibility, and with determination that the voice of the great Syrian people be the source and compass of all authority. Excellencies,
I am a daughter of the Syrian revolution, from Qamishlo and the Golan Heights. I represent the Syrian women's political movement. Like many Syrians, my struggle is deeply personal. My father, Mariam Jalabi, was imprisoned multiple times in Assad's prisons, as were relatives, friends, and countless Syrians whose lives were marked by fear and persecution under the regime. December 8, 2024 marked Syria's liberation, a historic turning point, a new dawn that opened the door to building a country that all Syrians can claim as their own, rooted in equality, justice, and dignity. On January 5th, 2025, I returned to Syria after 14 years in exile. At the border, I was told I had been wanted by 3 security branches. Yet, the officer smiled and said, "Welcome home." I entered my country without fear. Later, I brought my family for the first time to show them that we now have a country we can finally call home. What I share today is not an abstract political appeal. It is the voice of women and families who lived for 54 years under a brutal regime and paid the ultimate price for freedom over the past 14 years. Excellencies, the road ahead is turbulent and demanding, but allow me to outline a path forward built on 3 independent pillars. First pillar, a political transition anchored in democratic principles and the rule of law. This means, as stipulated by Resolution 1325, recognizing women as full partners in New Syria and architects of its constitutional, economic, and political future. My message to you today is clear. We stand here ready for the work it requires. Yet, today, women hold only 5% of seats in the People's Assembly and only 1 ministerial position, marking women's representation far from where it needs to be. Genuine political engagement with a guarantee of at least 30% women's inclusion, moving towards parity, is critical for national commissions, constitutional processes, elections, local governance, security sector reform, and economic planning. Further, it is essential to open civic and political space so people can freely express themselves and form political parties, reflecting their vision for a pluralistic Syria. The role of civil society, having carried the struggle for the past 14 years, must also be affirmed as an essential partner. All of this must be anchored in the spirit of Resolution 2254, reaffirmed by Resolution 2799 as a roadmap for an inclusive Syrian-led transition. Second pillar, protecting the human rights of every Syrian without exception. The true measure of any transition lies in the safety and dignity of all civilians, regardless of identity or geography. Lives continue to be lost in Syria to massacres and sexual and gender-based violence, putting entire communities in grave danger. On December 8, Syrians collectively vowed, never again. Now, we must turn that vow into reality. This means an end to abductions, torture, and organized violence, especially all forms of gender-based violence, by all parties. Justice and accountability must be core principles of the political transition, with women's rights at the center, including through the National Commission for Transitional Justice. Clarifying the fate of all disappeared and missing persons, and ensuring support for their families, including through the National Commission for the Missing. No family can heal while loved ones are unaccounted for. A comprehensive national plan, law, to prevent and respond to gender-based violence. We need a commitment to reform and refrain from adopting any new discriminatory laws on personal status, nationality, labor, and education in line with international standards. This includes the directive issued recently barring mothers from having custody over their children. The withdrawal of Assad regime's reservations to CEDAW is a must. It undermines its core guarantees of equality and non-discrimination, including freedom of movement and equality rights in marriage. Protection also means protection from external aggression and violations of sovereignty. When I returned to Syria in January, I found Israeli forces occupying my village in the Golan Heights. Last week, the doors were blown off my family home. I know firsthand how occupation strips communities of dignity and belonging. Syrians in the Golan, like all Syrians, deserve to live free of violence, occupation, and fear. No transition can gain trust without safety, and no peace can hold without justice, and no future can be built without inclusivity of all Syrians, including women, civil society, youth, and other marginalized groups. Third pillar, sustainable economic recovery. Excellencies, the continued lifting of broad sanctions is essential for economic recovery, without which we cannot rebuild. Over 90% of Syrians live under the poverty line. Over 50% of education and healthcare infrastructure and 1/3 of housing have been damaged or destroyed. More than 2.5 million children are out of school. These are not just statistics. These are warnings that without ensuring economic dignity, we are condemning a generation to uncertainty. Women and girls are deeply affected by these economic crises. When men were killed, disappeared, detained, or displaced, gender roles began to shift. In addition to the continuing of the unpaid and invisible gender labor of caring for their families and the injured, millions of women became sole providers. They did this during conflict, without access to formal work, banking, land ownership, documentation, or support. They continue doing this while facing gender-based violence and legal discrimination. Economic recovery must include women at its core, because they are rooted in the needs of their own communities. Also, the National Reconstruction Plan must include rural and heavily damaged areas, not only major cities. In light of all of these challenges, at such a sensitive moment in Syria's transition, I urge the Security Council to, first, initiate discussions on how best to support an inclusive, rights-based, Syrian-owned and Syrian-led transition, including through a new UN presence. Second, demand the full, equal, meaningful, and safe participation of all women at all levels of Syria's transition, and respect for their human rights, in accordance with the Security Council resolutions on women, peace, and security. Third, call on the Syrian authorities to work with women's civil society to develop, adopt, and fully implement a Syrian National Action Plan on women, peace, and security. Fourth, demand an end to the continued Israeli aggression in Syria and the full withdrawal to the 1974 line in accordance with the disengagement agreement. Failure to do so endangers civilians and undermines regional security. Finally, the Syrian people want justice. Hold Assad and his collaborators accountable, including by referring the situation in Syria to the International Criminal Court. Excellencies, Syria does not need guardianship. It needs partnership, shared responsibility between Syrians and the international community. Peace will not be built by political arrangements alone, but through justice and unwavering respect for the dignity of every Syrian. اسمحوا لي أن أنهي كما بدأت باللغة.
Allow me to finish as I started, in Arabic. May Syria live in freedom and independence.